The book of Nehemiah, in the Old Testament section of the Holy Bible, tells the true story of a Jewish man in exile who had the privilege of rising to a high government position in the Persian kingdom. Nehemiah, who is the writer of the book after whom it is also named, was the cupbearer of the king of Persia. The position of cupbearer was not a domestic servant position as many people understand it. It was a lucrative position in the days of Nehemiah. In those days, kings were usually assassinated by their enemies who used poison. Normally would poison their wine. To avoid this, kings started appointing trusted personalities to the position of cupbearer. So the cupbearer position became a top royal position. Whoever occupied this position became a right-hand person to the king. He was assigned a living quarter at the palace and actually shared the luxury of royalty. This was where Nehemiah found himself. But Nehemiah, in such a high position, never forgot his origin. He never forgot his motherland. He never forgot where he came from. One day, some Jews from his homeland of Judah and Jerusalem visited him. He was eager to know how the people back home were doing. He inquired of their living condition and the general infrastructure of Judah and Jerusalem. Jerusalem that was once a very beautiful city. The response of the visitors was that the people back home were in great trouble and disgrace. They were in great trouble and disgrace. The walls that provided protection around Jerusalem were broken down and burned down by enemy forces. Being a very successful man who lived many miles away from Jerusalem and enjoyed prosperity and prestige, Nehemiah's response would have been one of indifference. He would have just said, well, I'm sorry about that. He could have just said, well, I don't want to be bothered with that. Like many of us are doing when we step out of Barrobo, we no longer want to be bothered with Barrobo. But Nehemiah would have just said, well, I'm sorry about that. When you go home, tell everybody hello and tell them I'm sorry. After all, the situation in Jerusalem did not have any direct impact on Nehemiah's personal life. But Nehemiah's response was different. First, he empathized with the people back home. In other words, he put himself in their shoes. He imagined being in a situation of disgrace that his people were undergoing. He said, when I heard these things, this is what he said directly. He said, when I heard these things, I sat down and wept. This is a man who is occupying a very prominent position in the most powerful kingdom in the world at the time. And he heard bad news from home of the devastation that took place in his home. And he said, I sat down and wept. Nehemiah empathized with his people. If we must accomplish anything in Barrobo and for Barrobo, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the people we left back home many years ago. We must imagine the mockery they are receiving from other smaller tribes for not having any infrastructure to boast of. Nehemiah empathized with the people, and so must we empathize with our people. The second thing that Nehemiah did was he sought the face of God. This was a top, prosperous government official kneeling down and praying to the God of there are some people who feel so sophisticated that they don't believe that God matters in their life anymore. There are sometimes when we are growing up, we find ourselves in church. We celebrate with people in church, especially all of us in Barrobo. We are all acquainted with church. But by the time we travel out of Barrobo and God lifts us to little places of prestige and recognition, we feel that we are too sophisticated to call upon the name of God. But that was not the case with Nehemiah. With all the promotion he got, when he heard the bad news from home, the Bible says he knelt down and prayed to the God of heaven. As successful as Nehemiah was, he still had room in his heart for God and for prayer. This highly placed government official, he said, for some days, I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. This man was not a prophet. This man was not a priest. He was a government official functioning in a pagan nation, a pagan territory. But he had God in his heart. And when he wanted to do something about the condition of his people, he shouted on his knee. He knelt down, said he fasted and prayed and mourned for his people before the God of heaven. Our bishop, those of us in Barrobo who were appointed with church and God, and who have been lifted by God to respectable positions and are prospering, who start learning to mourn and fast and pray before the God of heaven on behalf of our motherland. If we turn our back on God, I'm afraid that we cannot expect to succeed in our development objectives. Just as nothing will succeed in Israel without God, nothing can actually succeed in Barrobo without God. Both Israel and Barrobo were chosen by God. The Barrobo tribe is a different tribe. It is God himself who has made us different. He set us apart for his purpose. So we cannot want to be, or we cannot desire in our heart to be like everybody else. Do you remember what the Lord did in Barrobo? In those early days of the missionaries, he chose four towns to plant the gospel deeply in the heart of Barrobo. Those towns were Newark and Glofaken in Glebuken district. Both of them have mission stations. Doeja in Wuja district and Feloken in what is now called Yonken district. That shows that God favored the entire tribe of Barrobo as his chosen people to the extent that he wanted to use this tribe to be the blessing of extending his kingdom to the neighboring tribes. But let us remember that the walls of Jerusalem were destroyed by the Babylonians as a demonstration of God's wrath when Israel turned her back on God and began to worship other gods. Similarly, the spiritual walls God built around Barrobo were destroyed when most of us turned our back on God, who graciously selected us among the tribes in Liberia for the propagation of his purpose. Do you know that the first tribe to receive the light of the gospel in Liberia was Barrobo? Do you know that? Yes. There were churches in Liberia before the missionaries took the gospel to Barrobo in 1908. But all the churches that were in existence were located along the coast among the settlers. The first church building ever to be erected among any tribal group in Liberia was built in Feloken, Barrobo, Maryland County. This was in addition to a boys' school that was once built in Newarken and a girls' school that was in Grofaken. The boys' school was later relocated to Feloken, and the girls' school was moved to Newark. Because of the gospel our forefathers embraced, Barrobo became the light to the other tribes around us. Barrobo became a land that was blessed by God. And everybody who worshiped God and accepted God began to refer to God as the God of the Barrobo people. We were the only place for education among the interior tribes of the Barrobo land, until later on when mission stations started being established among other Barrobo tribes. If we want to see Barrobo rise and shine again, we have to be like Nehemiah, to mourn, to fast, and to pray to the God of heaven on behalf of our people. And God will hear us. The third thing that Nehemiah did was he made use of his connections. Nehemiah was well connected, and so when he wanted to do something back home, he made use of the connections he had. After receiving the sad news, weeping and praying, he went away, but very sad. And it was very risky for Nehemiah, because in those days a cupbearer was never to appear gloomy in the presence of the king. That would be interpreted as having different intentions. That would cost him his life. But Nehemiah lost his smile because of the trouble and disgrace his people were living in. Though he himself was prospering, though he himself had national recognition in the kingdom he was serving, but he lost his smile when he realized that his own people were living in shame and disgrace. When the king asked him why he was sad, his answer was, "King live forever. Why should my face now look sad when the city where my ancestors were buried lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire?" By this response, Nehemiah was connecting the king's heart to the suffering of his people. The first lesson we can learn, the fourth lesson rather, we can learn from Nehemiah is he made himself available in solving the problem. Nehemiah made himself available in solving the problem. When the king asked him, "What do you want?" he said, "I want to go home. I want to go home and deal with the problem myself." This means Nehemiah had to sacrifice his comfort for the sake of his people, at least for a period of time. He had to leave the comfort of the palace at Susa to go to a city of dilapidated houses and broken walls. Solving the problem back home will sometimes require sacrificing our comfort and being personally involved to see changes taking place. The fifth and final lesson that I learned from Nehemiah that I want us to apply to ourselves is that Nehemiah mobilized resources. There is no way we can accomplish anything without mobilizing necessary resources. The people living in Jerusalem did not have enough financial and material resources to rebuild the broken walls. Nehemiah himself did not have enough resources to cover all the expenses of the construction that was necessary in Jerusalem. So Nehemiah requested for a letter from the king to a man called Asa. And Asa was the manager of the royal park to supply timbers for the project. He made use of the connection and also mobilized resources. If we have to be successful with this city walk project in Barrobo and other future projects, we have to mobilize resources. Some of the resources will have to come from our own pockets, and some will have to come from our connections. The second kind of resources that Nehemiah mobilized was human resources. He saved the cost by mobilizing the people in Jerusalem who could not afford financial responsibility. He mobilized them to roll their sleeves and get away. He divided the task to make it easier to accomplish. With material and human resources available, Nehemiah was able to embark on the project. But as soon as the work began, there was also opposition, criticism, and undermining. A man called Sanballat and the other guy called Tobiah, who were also top government officials of the neighboring territory of Transjordan, stood against this worthy project of rebuilding the broken walls of Jerusalem. They used all kinds of strategies to discourage Nehemiah and to discourage the project. Listen to the questions of mockery that Sanballat asked. He said, what are these people Jews doing? Would they restore their wall? Would they offer sacrifices again? Would they finish the wall one day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heap of rubble, point as they are? Then his friend Tobiah also joined him in the murmuring. And Tobiah said, what the Jews are building, even if a fox stepped on it, it will break down. When you all take anything of value, people will mock you, and people will undermine what you are doing. Do not pay attention to their criticism. Their goal is to discourage you so that you can abandon the worthy cause that you embark upon. Not soon that we started this particular project, that we started hearing negative voices that were intended to discourage us. But I can tell you, if we are the Nehemiah, we can persevere to the end and have a day of elevation. When Sanballat and Tobiah realized that the ridicule could not discourage Nehemiah and his people, they changed their strategy, they changed their tactics. They made a plan to physically attack Nehemiah and the workers. When the information reached Nehemiah, he divided the workers into two groups. He posted some of his workers as armed security guards, while the others continued doing the work. When Nehemiah and his people completed the wall with the exception of the gates, Sanballat, Tobiah, and other men who they recruited at the court Gershon, they invited Nehemiah to meet with them, pretending to become peaceful people. But their goal was to harm Nehemiah. But Nehemiah refused to go and told them that he was very busy with an important project, that he did not have time for talking. There are times to talk, there are times we talk, and there are times we remain quiet and focus on what God has called us to do. When Nehemiah refused to meet with them, they redesigned a big lie to intimidate and undermine the project. They said to Nehemiah, you need to come so that we can talk, because we heard that you are building the walls of Jerusalem to start rebel activity against the king of Persia. We even heard that you are intending to proclaim yourself as king of the Jews in defiance of the king's authority. This report will reach the king and you will be in trouble. So come, let's talk. But Nehemiah replied and told them that everything you are saying is not true. It is only a fabrication from your own head. The saddest thing that happened in this opposition was not the outside opposition, but we realized that there was also opposition from within Jerusalem itself. There were people in Jerusalem who sided with Sanballat and Tobiah and were reporting to the enemies of Israel on a daily basis the activities and movements of Nehemiah. It beats my imagination when people undermine themselves. It beats my imagination. One time I visited the Capitol Hill and I met Honorable Nathaniel Williams, the late Nathaniel Williams of Barrobo County. And when I introduced myself to him, I said, I'm Reverend Jimmy Coy. He said, okay, I heard about you. And he said, let's talk. You know, Nathaniel didn't have diplomacy, right? He talked as it was in his head. He called me on the side and said, Reverend Kua, you the Barrobo people, you are cowards. And I said, Honorable, how can you speak about such great people like that? He said, because if you Barrobo people decide that every time the senator will come from Barrobo, the senator will always come from Barrobo. So because everybody that ever becomes senator in this house rides on your population. Then you say, and you people, you know Nathaniel way, right? You say, and you people sat down there, bro, where man to the house? Instead of bringing Barrobo man for us to be talking. That was a little offensive, but that was kind of true. The problem we have is we are used to undermining one another and opposing one another. We don't like each other. Every Barrobo man that rises up, our expression is, you know, every Barrobo person, even if he is celebrated by outsider or she is celebrated by outsider, when you mention their name to a Barrobo person, they say, you know, I'm not hearing anything in this place. Sister Bessie and Sister Peter told me not to preach, so I've got to be very careful. I've got to put my preaching spirit under control. Alright? So it is my imagination that as great a people as we are, that we are not able to pull our forces together. That we are not able to pull our strength together and stand together as one great united people and do something that everybody will begin to be jealous of us. So brothers and sisters, fellow citizens of Barrobo, if this project is to succeed, we must put ourselves in the shoes of the people back home. Let us remove the disgrace from our people. We must be humble and pray like Nehemiah. Nehemiah did not only pray before meeting the king, he prayed throughout the entire project. We must also use our connections. If we are connected with the king, let our connection help to rebuild the dignity of our people. If you alone are dignified and your people are living in disgrace, you are not really dignified. I repeat, if you alone are dignified and the people to whom you belong are living in disgrace, indirectly you yourself you are living in disgrace. We must be willing to sacrifice our comfort and make ourselves available from time to time to make beneficial things happen in Barrobo. We will mobilize our resources. Every worthy thing is costly. Every worthy thing is costly. As we do these 5 things, we should also be prepared to stand together against possible opposition. And some of the opposition will come from outside. And don't be surprised that some of the opposition will also come from inside. And sometimes the one that comes from inside is even more embarrassing than the one that comes from outside. In the military, they call that friendly fire. They call that friendly fire in the military. America is not afraid of any army in the world. But America is afraid of friendly fire. When American soldiers open fire on American soldiers, that becomes more dangerous than when America faces another nation. So we should not have friendly fire in Barrobo among ourselves. We must learn to celebrate each other. We must learn to rally around things that happen in Barrobo. As far as I'm concerned, of all the river tribes in Monrovia, I think we have more Barrobo people here than any river tribe. If we are actually willing to attend the program, we have a serious problem with capacity right here, and everybody wants to show up. We're going to be standing up all along this wall. But we need to learn to pull ourselves together and stand together as one united people. With God as our helper, I believe we can rebuild the dignity of our motherland. God bless you.